The desperate call. The refugee fleet limped through the void like wounded animals seeking shelter. 17 Zephyrian vessels, their hulls scarred by plasma burns and particle beam strikes, carried the last free citizens of a dying world. Commander Thessa gripped the command chair as another shockwave rippled through her ship. Behind them, the Skorathi hunters closed in, methodical and merciless. 3 months ago, the Zephyrians had been a peaceful civilization of artists and philosophers. They had developed faster than light travel centuries before humans even reached their moon. Their crystalline cities floated in the clouds of their gas giant homeworld, creating symphonies from solar winds. They had never needed weapons beyond ceremonial pieces. War was an abstract concept studied in xenoanthropology texts about lesser species. That naivety had cost them everything. Ambassador Kale materialized on Earth's primary orbital station, his ethereal form flickering with exhaustion. The Zephyrians were beings of organized energy, capable of taking physical shape when needed. Right now, Kale could barely maintain cohesion. The human guard stepped back, unsure whether to offer assistance or maintain protocol. Station Commander Park Young-soo stepped forward, recognizing the signs of a species in distress. Ambassador Kale, what happened? Park's voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too many refugee crises. Humanity's 50 years in the galactic community had taught them that peace was always temporary. Kale's form solidified slightly, his voice resonating directly in their minds. The Skorathi Empire has invaded our system. They came without warning, without demands. They simply began harvesting. Our population, our resources, our very atmosphere. Commander, we need help. The Galactic Alliance has abandoned us. They say we are too far from core space, that resources cannot be spared for a border conflict. Park's expression darkened. He had heard this story before. The Galactic Alliance, for all its talk of unity and protection, operated on cold mathematics. Species deemed strategically unimportant were left to fend for themselves. Earth had learned this lesson early and adapted accordingly. While other species had disbanded their militaries upon joining the Alliance, trusting in collective security, humanity had done something different. They had hidden theirs. The United Earth Council convened within the hour. President Chen Wei sat at the head of the table, surrounded by military advisors, diplomatic corps, and the enigmatic representatives of the Deep Space Command. The DSC had been humanity's best-kept secret for 3 decades, a massive military infrastructure hidden in the dark spaces between star systems. Officially, Earth maintained only a small defensive fleet, just enough to satisfy Alliance requirements. Unofficially, humanity had never stopped preparing for war. Admiral Maria Vasquez pulled up the tactical display, showing the Zephyrian system and the Skorathi positions. The Skorathi have deployed their standard harvesting configuration. 3 dreadnoughts, 12 cruisers, and approximately 40 support vessels. They're stripping the planet systematically, layer by layer. At current rates, the remaining Zephyrian population will be eliminated or enslaved within 72 hours. And the Alliance response? President Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. The Alliance Security Council is scheduling a meeting for next week to discuss the situation. Diplomatic Attaché Kumar replied bitterly. They're calling it a territorial dispute requiring mediation. A heavy silence fell over the room. Everyone present understood what that meant. By the time the Alliance finished deliberating, there would be no Zephyrians left to save. The Skorathi counted on this bureaucratic paralysis. It was how they had absorbed 17 systems over the past century, always picking targets just far enough from Alliance core worlds to avoid immediate response. How long would it take to mobilize the Warborn fleet? President Chen's question cut through the silence like a blade. Admiral Vasquez's smile was sharp. Madam President, we've been mobilized since the day we joined the Alliance. The fleet can jump within 6 hours. But I should remind you, revealing our true military capability will have consequences. The Alliance, the Skorathi, everyone will know that humanity has been hiding its strength. Good, Chen replied. It's time they learned why humans never forgot how to wage war. Admiral, you have authorization for Operation Thunderstrike. Show the galaxy what happens when humanity's friends call for help. Deep in the void between systems, where sensors couldn't penetrate and patrols never ventured, the darkness came alive. Massive shipyards hidden in hollowed-out asteroids opened their doors. Vessels that had been kept in perfect readiness for decades powered up their reactors. The Warborn fleet, humanity's true military might, began to move. The fleet was a testament to human paranoia and ingenuity. While other species had trusted in peace, humans had studied every battle, every conflict, every military technology they encountered. They had improved upon them, combined them, and created something uniquely terrifying. The dreadnought UES Retribution alone carried more firepower than most species' entire defensive forces. Its main gun, a gravitational lance developed from salvaged predecessor technology, could punch through a moon. Captain James Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching his crew perform final checks. They were young, most of them, trained in simulations and war games but never tested in real combat. That was about to change. The Skarathi had made a fatal error. They had attacked a species that humans considered friends. Throughout their history, humans had shown they would cross oceans and continents to aid their allies. Now they would cross the stars. The Zephyrian refugees huddled in Earth's orbital stations, watching in amazement as ship after ship emerged from hidden positions. Carriers that dwarfed space stations, bristling with fighter craft that humans piloted manually, something considered insanely dangerous by galactic standards. Destroyers equipped with stealth technology that made them virtually invisible until they struck. Support vessels carrying ground forces in powered armor that could operate in any environment. Ambassador Kale's energy form pulsed with something that might have been hope. "How many ships do you have?" Station Commander Park watched the tactical display fill with friendly signatures. Officially, 12 defensive vessels. Unofficially, the Warborn fleet consists of 217 combat vessels, with another 300 in reserve. We learned long ago that the galaxy is full of predators. The only way to protect the sheep is to be a better wolf. The thunder of liberation. The Skarathi Harvester Command detected the gravitational anomalies 17 light minutes from Zephyr's orbital perimeter. Supreme Harvester Gorax studied the readings with his 4 eyes, each independently analyzing different data streams. Spatial rifts were opening, dozens of them in perfect synchronized formation. His tactical officer's scales shifted to a pale green, the Skarathi equivalent of confusion. Supreme Harvester, we're detecting massive energy signatures. Configuration unknown. They're not using standard Alliance jump protocols. Gorax's mandibles clicked dismissively. Probably Alliance observers finally arriving to document our legal claim to this system. Continue harvesting operations. Increase extraction rate by 30%. What emerged from those rifts would haunt Skarathi military doctrine for generations. The human fleet didn't arrive. It materialized like a predator that had been stalking its prey through tall grass. The UES Retribution led the vanguard, its 3-kilometer bulk dwarfing even the Skarathi dreadnoughts. Along its hull, weapon ports opened like the eyes of some ancient beast awakening from slumber. Admiral Vasquez stood at the tactical command center of the Retribution, watching the Skarathi fleet scramble to respond. "All vessels, this is Admiral Vasquez. Transmission on all frequencies." Her voice echoed across the system, carried by communication arrays that overrode Skarathi jamming attempts. "Attention, Skarathi Harvester Fleet. You are engaged in genocide against the Zephyrian people. You have 30 seconds to power down all weapons and cease harvesting operations. Failure to comply will be met with overwhelming force. This is your only warning." Gorax's response was predictable. The Skarathi had built their empire on the assumption that no single species would risk Alliance censure to intervene in their operations. His fleet opened fire, plasma lances and particle beams lashing out at the human vessels. The beams struck advanced shielding that absorbed and redistributed the energy. A human adaptation of 3 different alien technologies. Where Skarathi weapons hit, human shields flared but held. "Admiral, they've opened fire," Tactical Officer Rodriguez reported, his voice steady despite this being his first real combat engagement. "Then God help them," Vasquez replied. "All vessels, weapons free. Execute Battle Plan Omega." The human response was not just military action, it was artistic destruction. Fighter squadrons launched from carriers, their human pilots pulling maneuvers that registered 35 times standard gravity. Normal species would be liquefied by such forces, but humans had developed inertial dampening suits and trained from childhood to withstand extreme acceleration. The fighters danced between Skarathi point defense fire, delivering precision strikes that disabled weapon systems without destroying the ships. The capital ships engaged with weapons that seemed to bend physics, gravitational lances that created microscopic black holes, tearing through shields and armor as if they didn't exist. Missile swarms that used predictive AI to anticipate evasive maneuvers, hitting targets before they finished moving. Railguns that accelerated projectiles to 90% light speed, turning simple metal rods into planet-cracking weapons. But the true horror for the Skarathi was the boarding operations. Human Marines encased in powered armor that made them look like mechanical demons breached Skarathi vessels with surgical precision. They moved through corridors with a coordination that spoke of thousands of years of warfare evolution. Non-lethal weapons disabled Skarathi crew, while lethal ones were reserved for those who continued to resist. Sergeant Kate Thompson led her squad through the Skarathi dreadnought's corridors, their armor's adaptive camouflage making them nearly invisible. They reached the detention center where Zephyrian prisoners were held, beings of living energy trapped in containment fields. Thompson's plasma cutter made short work of the locks. "We're here to get you home," she said simply, her suit's translator conveying not just words but the fierce protectiveness that humans felt for those under their protection. On the planet's surface, the liberation was even more dramatic. Drop pods fell like rain, each containing a squad of human soldiers equipped for any contingency. They struck harvesting sites simultaneously, overwhelming Skarathi ground forces who had never faced opponents that treated war as both science and art. Cities that had been under siege for weeks were liberated in hours. Zephyrian survivors spoke in awed whispers of the humans who fought with weapons in their hands and fury in their hearts. Colonel David Chen led the assault on the primary harvesting facility, where thousands of Zephyrians were being processed for slave transport. The facility's defenders had erected energy barriers and positioned heavy weapons. Chen's response was to call in orbital support. The UES Thunder's precise bombardment vaporized the defensive positions while leaving the prisoner areas untouched, a feat of accuracy that defied belief. "How?" a Skarathi commander asked as Chen's forces secured the facility. "How can you be so precise and so brutal simultaneously?" Chen removed his helmet, revealing a face that could have belonged to a teacher or accountant, rather than a warrior. "We've had 10,000 years to practice war and 50 years to study everyone else's mistakes. You made the error of thinking our kindness was weakness. It's not. It's a choice. And you made us choose differently." The battle lasted 4 hours and 17 minutes. The entire Skarathi fleet was either destroyed or captured. Not a single human life was lost, though several dozen were injured. The Zephyrian casualties were limited to those who had died before the fleet arrived. Of the original 20 million Zephyrians, 14 million were saved. It wasn't perfect, but in the cold mathematics of genocide prevention, it was miraculous. The aftermath rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. The Galactic Alliance Council convened an emergency session, demanding explanations for humanity's hidden military. Ambassador Sarah Williams stood before them, unrepentant and defiant. "You ask why we hid our strength? Look at what happened to the Zephyrians. They trusted in your protection, disbanded their militaries, and were nearly wiped out while you debated jurisdiction. We joined your alliance, but we never forgot that the only true security comes from strength." The Skarathi Empire, reeling from the loss of an entire harvester fleet, immediately sued for peace. They returned all conquered territories and released all slaves. The message was clear. Humanity would not tolerate genocide regardless of political consequences. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the younger species, just joining the galactic community. They saw in humanity something that had been missing from galactic politics for millennia: a willingness to act, to sacrifice political standing for moral imperative. Applications for defensive alliances with Earth increased 100-fold. Ambassador Kale, his energy form now bright and stable, found Admiral Vasquez observing the Zephyrian homeworld from the Retribution's observation deck. The crystalline cities were being rebuilt, their songs once again harmonizing with solar winds. "Why?" Kale asked. "Why risk so much for us? We barely knew each other. We had no defensive treaties, no trade agreements of significance." Vasquez turned to face the energy being, her expression softening. "There's an old human saying, 'The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good beings to do nothing.' We've seen what happens when people stand by and watch others suffer. Never again, not on our watch." She gestured to the fleet surrounding the planet, a protective shield of human engineering and determination. "This is what humans do. We protect our friends, we defend the innocent, and we remind the galaxy that some things are worth fighting for." The Skarathi learned that today. Others will learn it tomorrow if necessary. The Warborn fleet remained in Zephyrian space for 3 months, helping rebuild and establishing a permanent defensive station. When they finally departed, they left behind more than just protection. They left hope. The galaxy had discovered that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their hidden fleet or advanced technology. It was their unwillingness to abandon those who called for help. The designation Warborn took on new meaning across the galaxy, not as conquerors or aggressors, but as the ones who would answer when no one else would, the ones who had never forgotten how to fight because they understood that sometimes fighting was the only way to preserve peace. Earth's message was clear: call for aid, and humanity would answer with thunder and fury, with precision and compassion, with the full might of a species that had transformed warfare into the art of protection.